So faculty development in my mind is absolutely critical if we're going to successfully roll out CBD in any program. And without a successful faculty development program, the rollout is going to take years or will be very poorly implemented.
The biggest challenge is going to be the faculty development piece, because the faculty are used to giving a strong resident very little constructive criticism. Because at the end of an OR day, at the end of a shift, if you had a great resident working with you, your temptation is to say, thanks so much for all your help, goodbye. And you're tired and you want to go home.
The Office of Postgraduate Medical Education is heavily invested in the success of the rollout of CBD in all of our programs over the next several years. We recognize that faculty development is a critical piece of making that happen, and we also recognize that our program directors are not necessarily the people most skilled in rolling that out. So we are working effectively with the members of our team who are dedicated to CBD in finding and supporting best practices to roll out faculty development.
For example, you might need to do a needs assessment to determine where your faculty are now and where you need them to be with CBD. And then you have to decide what activities you need to do for your faculty. You have to figure out how you're going to get faculty engaged in the process, wanting to improve their skills and to jump into CBD and be enthusiastic participants.
So I think when we're planning faculty development to prepare faculty to transition to CBD, some of the topics that we need to consider are, what is CBME? This concept is new to a lot of faculty, and we need to teach them what CBME is and also the rationale for why we are transitioning to a competency-based curriculum.
I think the biggest challenge has been helping people to understand why we are transitioning to CBD. I think a lot of people have the idea of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And it's true that our residency programs have traditionally been of very high quality. And so they're right in a way to say, you better present me with a compelling rationale for change. I've seen that a lot actually around our faculty, where people will ask, why are we doing this? And don't you think it's a bad idea? I think that once people embrace the reason for CBD and the sort of compelling rationale behind it, then faculty development should proceed a whole lot more smoothly.
Faculty are also going to need help understanding their new roles within this program. There's going to be requirements in how they teach and assess residents, and it's important that we clarify what these roles are for the faculty. We need to ensure that faculty are well prepared to assess residents using workplace-based assessments using direct observation. And also, how do you provide frequent and ongoing feedback to residents? And then how do you do this when the feedback is a little bit more challenging? So how do you have those difficult conversations with residents to help them identify where they're struggling and help them improve in those areas?
Rater training is going to be key. I know increased opportunities for assessment, I think, are going to become sort of one of the key aspects of this transition to CBD. So ensuring that we're all using the same validated tools in the same way.
I think it's going to be important for faculty to have a lot of development on how to evaluate learners in this new environment, because it's going to take a lot more direct observation of specific things and less of this global impression that we're currently exposed to. The resident did really well in the rotation, the resident did poorly, the resident is okay. It's going to be addressing giving real concrete feedback on each thing, instead of getting away from evaluating the learner as a whole to breaking it down and saying, this resident is able to do this resident is able to do that, and being okay evaluating a much smaller component of their training.
We still are based very much on lectures, and lectures have been developed to deliver knowledge in a structured format. But we know nowadays that the access to information is really easy, and we don't need to bring that to lectures. What we need to do is to translate that knowledge into clinical practice. Lectures, workshops, flipped classrooms, whatever we want to do with the trainees, it needs to change the approach. We're not talking about giving information which is widely accessible. We are talking about translating that knowledge into real clinical practice.
One of them is definitely feedback and the ability to provide that. I think there also has to be a focus on the goals of assessment and how to provide a good assessment. We have this culture in medical education where we fail to fail people. And sometimes people do need to fail or to be offered remediation to get better.
CBME is going to force us to have sometimes difficult conversation, even with great residents, and say, you know, at your level, I would have expected X, Y, and Z, and A, B, and C, and you missed C. And let's work on that for next time. And that's a hard conversation to have, and I think that the staff need some faculty development around that, of how to give difficult feedback to residents, how to invest the time. It's going to be a culture change.
We're also asking faculty to teach and assess things that they weren't actually formally taught themselves. So we're now asking them to teach competences within the intrinsic CanMeds roles, so the skills around being a good communicator, collaborator, leader, etc. So we need to really provide support to faculty around how do we teach these competences, and then also how do we assess them. And the Office of Postgrad Medical Education has a series of ebooks for faculty that will help them develop ideas and strategies for teaching and assessing these CanMed roles.
I also think that it's a good idea to focus on importance of reflection and kind of self-regulation. We tend to leave that by the wayside a lot because there's so many other competing interests. In a field that's self-regulated, if we can't think about how we're doing on our own and kind of recalibrate, it's a problem.
In the Department of Anesthesia, we found that the most effective way to do this was at grand rounds, because it's the only activity where we get the vast majority of our faculty showing up. So in addition to the grand round strategy, we also employed a number of other mechanisms. So we sent out newsletters, we sent out emails periodically to the entire department to provide them periodic updates. We also didn't want to underestimate the power of our ability of our faculty members to talk informally about it, where the lounge is a great place where a lot of things that are controversial are discussed. And over coffee, we frequently are able to disseminate a lot of the critical information.
Faculty preparation is a big thing as we think of this transition. So what we've done is we've introduced a few medical education related grand rounds where we invite different faculty who have experience in teaching and in the transition to CBD to come and give us sessions on how to improve or how this change will impact us. And the goal in all those sessions is really to show what's available, what tools, how are other people doing things differently in medical education, and also showing our faculty how it's not that big of a transition and that they will be supported.
Spreading the message behind CBD is going to be more effective if you come at it from more than one direction. So a top-down message can seem very sort of remote, autocratic, and not really responsive to the needs of the people who are actually on the ground. We had that top-down message, but also we had thought leaders, so people, educators who were engaged in creating the program, who were aware of a lot of the key messages under CBD, who would essentially be there to sit in the lounge. When somebody said, hey, what do you think about CBD? You know, it seems like a few things are wrong with it. They could say, no, actually, I support it, and it's going to benefit us in a number of ways, which are, you know, and then they could describe them. And so having trusted colleagues who embrace the message and spread the message has really been helpful in terms of getting our faculty all together and pulling in the same direction. So we did hold some retreats, not for everybody in the department, but for people who were involved in the development of our CBD program at the ground level. And those were very successful as well. However, I think those were really great in terms of, number one, sort of disseminating key information to key players early, and number two, developing a bunch of thought leaders, so people who could spread the message in your department.
I'm working with the Canadian Association of Pathologists to try to bring the ideas and concepts about CBME to the pathology community. We started organizing educational symposia at the national level. The first one, we talked about CBME, why CBME, and how would CBME be applied to pathology. Then we moved to assessment for learning and simulation in pathology.
We've actually created videos for our new online platforms. So we have user guides that the staff can always go back to in order to fill out the CCAT. It will show them step by step how to do this, as well as the learning cases.
The biggest piece of information or piece of advice I would have for departments is to make sure that the faculty development does involve some form of dialogue with the faculty members. It's the only way for you to truly understand what they understand about the rollout of the program, but to also understand their concerns so you can more effectively address them.
The biggest thing I could think about for program directors to work in the meantime while they're planning the transition to CBD is to start the dialogue early with their faculty. It's taken the anesthesia program 2 years specifically to work on faculty development to ensure that the staff are aware of what CBD is, the rationale, the purpose, as well as the language about assessments and evaluations.
Realize that your faculty have a lot of demands on their time. You know, they're already teaching, they're already doing clinical care, a lot of them are doing research or admin. Be realistic about how much faculty development you can really fit into their schedule. Make it easy for them. You know, put some modules online and let people complete it at their own pace, at their own convenience. Fit education into your existing programs of continuing professional development. Embrace the process. Don't make the mistake of thinking that you can sort of give a bunch of faculty development and then your job is done.
I remember when we first presented the idea of CBME at the National Pathology Conference. At the beginning of the session, Dr. Linda Snell from the Royal College, she asked the question, how many of you are enthusiastic about the implementation of CBME? And she asked people to raise their hands. I would say that maybe a handful of people raised their hands at the beginning of the session. After the 3 sessions on CBME, which was a 3-hour afternoon, she repeated the same question, and the whole audience raised their hands. They were enthusiastic, it's just they didn't know about it. So I think that as faculty and residents become more familiar with CBD, it's natural. It's just because our patients deserve it.
So there are a lot of unknowns when moving towards a competency-based residency training program, but I think we have a lot of resources. Here in Ottawa especially, there's a lot of very interested, motivated educators in all departments who are willing to share experiences and techniques and tips. And I think that as we move forward in CBD and in implementing CBD, I think that brain trust is going to be extremely helpful.